Trump Online.
Thank you for watching War Room Weekly.
And it turns out that Donald Trump's campaign platform was the prescription for the American worker.
He is quite clearly the leader to return us to that stature.
Tim, clearly Joe Biden has lost touch with reality.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a good night. Hello and welcome to another edition of Team Trump Online's War Room Weekly, where we take a closer look at the contrast between President Trump's excellent record of accomplishment for the American people versus Joe Biden's record of failure and terrible ideas for the future. I'm Tim Murtaugh, Communications Director for the Trump 2020 campaign, and we are happy today to be joined by two great members of Congress, Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York. Congressman Zeldin, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Tim.
And Congressman Warren Davidson from the great state of Ohio. Congressman Davidson, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Tim.
Let's get right to it. Over the course of the last 4 days, we have seen the Democrats, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, get together virtually, of course, for the Democratic National Convention. Let's start with you, Congressman Zeldin. What are your thoughts? You've probably, I don't know if you had trouble sleeping at night, perhaps, and decided to watch that for aid. What were your thoughts about the DNC that we just witnessed?
It was a very depressing, bitter, negative, oftentimes angry, divisive message. There was, really from Monday through Thursday, there was this feeling of score settling with the content. Just take President Obama's speech. Everyone remembers from 2004 and 2008 and 2012. It was a message of optimism and positivity, and he was promising hope and change. It was an uplifting message that carried him into the White House, that carried him into a second term. Yet his speech that we witnessed this week really was indicative of a lot of the other message we saw over the course of this Democratic National Convention. Like he was trying to settle scores and he was angry. I think that for their base, they might be watching that. They're feeding off of it. They love it because they're angry, bitter, and depressed too. So there's that population of viewers that might actually feed off of it. But I think for an independent viewer who's tuning in, trying to figure out what type of direction they want for their country, it was just so divorced from reality and negative, where Pelosi is basically saying the Democrats have to have absolute power in order for her to have any type of a positive outlook. And I think independent-minded voters are smarter than they're giving them credit for, these Democrats.
Yeah, I think so. And let's go to our other guest here, Congressman Davidson. When you watch the Democrats, it's pretty clear that in their minds they think that the United States was broken at its founding. It has remained broken for 244 years, and it is broken today. And they really paint a picture of America as a place where no one in his or her right mind would want to live. And I think that's a really strange way to try to attract support. And so in watching it, Congressman Davidson, what was your view of their 4-day fiasco?
Yeah, very much, dark and dishonest and very, very disingenuous over and over again. So to your point, you have these beautiful words occasionally in speeches about, hope and optimism for America, but the underlying narrative is the exact opposite. Is the core premise is to fundamentally remake America. We got it wrong from the get-go. It's not a more perfect union. It's a complete, fundamentally different approach. And you see that with the failed attempt to make Joe Biden look like a centrist candidate from John Kasich at the very beginning. But the whole rest of just right after, you see Bernie Sanders talking about how Biden will be the most progressive candidate. So you saw this contrast where, they really think the American public must be, able to fall for this. We can say at the same event that Biden is both this and that, and yet they still love America while just totally casting darkness over the whole idea that anyone would actually love this country. Meanwhile, millions of people around the world flood into this place because it really is unique in the world, a beacon of hope and a light in the world.
Yeah, and what I think what we saw here is this was actually formalizing and making official the complete takeover of Joe Biden by the radical extreme left. And you saw by the speaker list, you just mentioned Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders said that, he and his followers have been working so hard, and that in his view, ideas that were viewed as extreme and fringe not very long ago are now mainstream thought in the Democrat Party. And of course, we've been saying all along, Joe Biden is an empty vessel that is being filled by the agenda of the extreme left, and that's the AOCs of the world and Bernie Sanders of the world and all the radicals that are in charge of today's Democrat Party. So, Congressman Davidson, let's stay with you. How do you think that plays with Americans? Because it's clearly they're putting a public face on this, but the subtext is all these radical leftist ideas that Bernie Sanders, it's as though Bernie Sanders actually won the primary and is the candidate because they are his issues that Joe Biden is being forced to run on. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the president's best tweets of the week was, Joe Biden is a Trojan horse for socialism. So what are they filling this empty vessel of Joe Biden with? It is the socialist platform. It is democratic socialism. And they tried to say, oh, we're going to slight AOC and only give her a minute. But they gave all the ideas, all the attention in the world. And they put a little window dressing around the edges by people that say, well, Joe Biden's a nice guy. And fundamentally, he's got a likable personality to some people. But it's just being filled with unlikable ideas. Those ideas have to matter. And you got, nearly 50 years in elected office of words, but the deeds behind them are horrible and wrong over and over again. And then instead of learning from that and changing course, Joe Biden's doubling down on the exact wrong course for America. And that's exactly what people across Ohio are saying as I'm out and about here in August.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. They can't talk about Joe Biden's record because we know that he has a record of presiding over the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. He voted for NAFTA. He has been an appeaser and a promoter of China's interests in getting China into the World Trade Organization. It cost the United States 3.5 million jobs, and he still doesn't view China as an economic threat today. And we heard a lot about how Joe Biden's a nice guy. People like Joe Biden. He's a good husband. He's a good father. He's a good grandfather. And all of those things, I'm sure, are true. But the record, as you just said, Congressman Davidson, the record matters and issues matter. And Congressman Zeldin, why is it? Let me ask you this. It's not really rhetorical, but it's sort of a leading question, I guess. Why is it, do you think, that they spent so much time focusing on Joe Biden and a description of what kind of a guy he is, and not the actual policies that he has pursued and is pursuing now? Why?
I think they're trying to make him more likable. They see his numbers. I mean, I see his numbers in my own district. He is unpopular. In the 1st Congressional District of New York, his unfavorables are remarkably high. And they're probably looking at swing states. That's why everyone who's tuning in here from those swing states, I'll tell you, the Democrats are looking at your neighborhood. They're looking for votes on your street. And they're trying to get their guy over the finish line. And part of that strategy, I think, is to get people to buy into the person more because they don't want to talk about the vision. And notice that there wasn't a discussion about China at all. I'm talking about appeasing. There was nothing about confronting them on trade or Huawei, this race to 5G, or what we see with the parent company of TikTok. This administration is taking action there in cybersecurity, and that list goes on. The patent and IP infringement, all the threats that we face from China. We just went through this shutdown in my area, for example. We've experienced other parts of the country where unfortunately, the president didn't inherit a federal stockpile that was filled with all of the N95 masks, of all the ventilators. The president did send thousands of ventilators to New York. He did send hundreds of thousands of masks one night when we called him up and asked him late on a Saturday night by Sunday. He was announcing it from the White House press room. He announced he was going to send 200,095 masks to Suffolk. He ended up actually sending close to 400,000 over the next 48 or 72 hours. We saw it with his approvals of the lab testing and the USS Comfort and the Javits Center. That list goes on with regards to COVID. But part of this real frustration is how the whole thing started. It was China lying, the World Health Organization lying about it. And we lost valuable time because one of the keys of fighting a pandemic is early detection. So I'm just talking about China as an example, but why would they spend so much time talking about Joe Biden as a grandfather? Part of it is that strategy of raising favorables, of lowering his unapproval numbers. But I think it's also to avoid that conversation about China. Why didn't they talk about their proposal on paper about having cashless bail all across the entire country? Why aren't they spending time condemning those who, by the way, are their voters, rioting, looting in our streets, and what we're seeing in Portland, Seattle, Chicago, and New York City, really being a warning shot of what might happen in our suburbs and elsewhere if they did, in fact, have that takeover of everything that Nancy Pelosi was advocating for. So I think those are some of the other reasons why they would be talking about him as a grandfather.
Yeah, and the same, Tim, one of the things with Kamala Harris as an example, just the idea that there should be no crime in illegal immigration. You look at how she's moved decriminalizing, any number of things, and they're trying to paint her in a positive light as well. They don't want to talk about the actual policy proposals and the things, like the new Green Deal, to try to play that, it's somehow different than the Green New Deal. And it's all an effort to try to energize their base because they had no energy. That came across in the Korea. When you get a chance to record the videos and telegraph it, and there's still no energy at their convention behind it, there's no energy for the base. And so their only appeal is to say, well, but he's a nice guy, because they know that if they did energize their base with these radical ideas, they would completely disengage with the rest of America.
Yeah, and we see Kamala Harris, and I don't think she excited anybody when she was added to the ticket. And certainly we know it's actually well documented. As much as we discount the public polling because of their methodology and they're flawed, you really can't conceal a 40-point gap on enthusiasm. There's no question of that. Let's remember about these two candidates, who they are, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Combined, they have failed in running for president 3 times. Joe Biden twice and Kamala Harris once, just very recently. And remember the media's reaction to Kamala Harris when she withdrew from the Democrat primaries before any votes had even been cast. She was polling at about 1%. Her campaign was beset by mismanagement, and from the top, really, from the candidate down, she was having trouble raising money. She had to close down all of her state operations, and her campaign was an utter failure. And the media heaped scorn on her and how the campaign had been run. And then 6 months later, when she reemerges as Joe Biden's pick, suddenly she's this heroine and this heroic figure who comes out, and the media loves her all over again. So they really have the attention span of a mosquito. But let's talk about what the actual issues are that Joe Biden is running on. And Congressman Davidson, we'll start with you on that. Principal among Joe Biden's campaign proposals, and one that we didn't hear a single word about in 4 entire days of Democratic National Convention coverage, was the idea that he is going to raise taxes on 80% of Americans by at least $4 trillion. Now, as the nation is coming out of the coronavirus crisis and we're beginning to get back to work, and President Trump is building up the economy for a second time, what do you think, and what would your constituents think, Congressman Davidson, in Ohio, about the prospect of $4 trillion in new taxes right now or at any time?
Well, it totally plays to the narrative: class warfare, divide America on every line that you can, and frankly, deceive America. I think he'll somehow believes that Americans will forget that the economy was stagnant when he was vice president, that the ideas under the Obama-Biden administration led to stagnant wages, low growth. They mocked Donald Trump for saying we were going to bring manufacturing jobs back to America. And the reality is, when Donald Trump said those things on the campaign, he delivered on those promises. and the policies that were put in place with a Republican-led Congress, which is important to getting the Trump agenda back on track, full offense. It really did result in the best economy. What were they going to say prior to COVID? Too much peace and prosperity? I mean, all the ideas worked.
Yeah, it's almost like they're betting on the economy to collapse. They want a death count as high as possible as part of a political calculation to benefit them electorally on November 3rd. I know that that's a raw, difficult thought to process, but that's basically the way that their campaign is structured as far as the political calculation goes with their messaging. And by the way, to your question, Tim, about the proposal to increase taxes, and Warren talks about the Green New Deal, and we see the support in the Democratic Party for a full-blown federal takeover of healthcare and getting rid of private healthcare insurance. If you try to do this, isn't just about raising taxes on the wealthy. They love to say, and Joe Biden said it. Yeah, he just said that we want to raise taxes on the wealthy, that they could pay their fair share. If you literally confiscated 100% of the wealth of the wealthiest Americans, forget about raising taxes a little bit. If you took every single asset of all the wealthiest Americans, you still could not pay for everything that they're proposing. So what happens next? If you take everyone's money, then they have to go after my middle income constituents. They have to go after Warren's middle income constituents. They don't have enough money to pay for what they're proposing otherwise, even if they took 100% of Jeff Bezos's money and Michael Bloomberg's money and Mark Zuckerberg's money. So they're not being honest with the finances aspect of it when they say the popular line of the wealthy need to pay their fair share.
Yeah, and I think he gives away the game when I know he dresses it up as soak the rich and let's tax the rich, but he gives away the game when he says out prior to the pandemic, when he was actually campaigning. I know it's ancient history now, but saying that the first thing he's going to do is repeal the Trump tax cuts. Well, that means a tax increase on 82% of Americans who pay taxes. And so that's what he means. That's what he's said. And when he gives his speech at the convention, of course, he says, oh, it's only about the 1% and the rich. And he makes people think that he's talking about the people like you just mentioned, like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and others. But that's not it. It extends.
By the way, and Tim, I mean, you reversing the tax cuts, also like for our businesses that are able to grow, they have jobs. We want them to have more. We're getting businesses from overseas. The president is getting to come back here, a combination of lowering the corporate tax rate and also his trade deals, the USMCA, which was amazing to replace failed NAFTA agreement, and what he had as progress with China, really at the capstone at the end of 2019, which was a big deal. We've seen the help already with our farmers. But if you reverse that tax bill entirely, I'm not talking about any cookie cutter approach. If he's talking about just reversing it, that's an over 50% increase on all businesses. Over 50%. Yeah. Are you kidding me? So it hurts middle income individuals, and it's also it hurts them multiple ways, not just from their own paychecks, but also their employers seeing an over 50% tax hike. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, and he also the different ideas that he would have that would affect the economy broadly. You mentioned the corporate tax rate. Right now, the president has lowered the corporate tax rate down to 21%. Joe Biden says that he would raise that to 28%. If he did that, he would make the United States corporate tax rate higher than it is in China, which, of course, makes it more attractive for people to do business in China than it would be to do business with the United States. And just another example of how he really handicaps the American economy at the benefit of foreign economies. And in particular, we keep hearing that again. It keeps coming up over and over again. China is something that will dog Joe Biden throughout this campaign. And every once in a while, you may hear something a little bit about his son Hunter and how he got a sweetheart deal from a Chinese controlled bank over there in Beijing. So that's
Tim. If I could add, if you don't mind, what you just mentioned a great point when you're talking about Joe Biden says that he wants to increase the corporate tax rate to 28%, and he's also saying that he wants to reverse Donald Trump's tax cuts. Those are two different proposals. I mean, he's literally stepping all over his own messaging. He's lying to the American public. Those are two different proposals. One increases it to 28, and the other one increases it to the mid-30s.
That's right. Two different proposals, and he kind of brushes it aside by leaving audiences believing that, oh, he's just talking about, raising taxes on executives. No, these are job creators. He's going to make it more expensive for people to do business in the United States without the explanation that, of course, that affects job creation. There's no question of that. Let's talk about immigration policy for a second, because both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are, again, on the extreme fringe of their party when it comes to our nation's national security at our borders. They are running on an open borders policy. They won't deport criminal illegal aliens. They both support sanctuary cities, which means having local law enforcement officials not cooperate with the immigration authorities at the federal level. They also support giving taxpayer-provided health care to illegal aliens, as well as providing illegal aliens with work permits so that they can compete with American workers for jobs that Americans will need as we are emerging very strongly, emerging from the coronavirus crisis. So that's really a twofold issue. And Congressman Zeldin, I'll start with you. It's really a twofold issue. When you're talking about open borders, it's a national security and public safety issue, but it's also an economic issue for Americans, isn't it?
Yeah, no question. Absolutely. We have people who are working inside of the United States who are not here legally. They aren't paying taxes. There are business owners cutting corners. You have others who aren't yet in our country because they follow the rules. They go to their local consulate and they say, I want to go to the United States. I've read, I've heard of, I've thought about the American dream. I'm filled with hope and, education for my kids and opportunity for my family. How do I get there? And then they explain, okay, this is the process. And out of respect for the process, and they're not here. I have more sympathy for those people than the ones who said, you know what, I'm not going to respect your process. I'm just going to head there. The national security piece here on Long Island, when Donald Trump came into office, MS-13 was a huge threat all throughout Long Island. And we have seen this partnership between different levels of government all working together to successfully crack down on MS-13 and this transnational gang violence and supporting ICE. While there are Democrats who talk about getting rid of ICE, these great ICE agents are not only going after MS-13, they're going after sex traffickers, human traffickers, people who are committing violent crimes. These hardworking, dedicated men and women should be supported more, not less. And then you get Democrats talking about abolishing the Department of Homeland Security. You had the ACLU just come out last week talking about getting rid of the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump, Republicans in Congress, a lot of the people tuning in, watching here, we believe in a couple of basic fundamental principles: that a nation without borders is no nation at all. We believe that our nation's backbone is our rule of law. And it's about whether it's building the wall on our border, whether it's internally within our country, supporting our men and women in blue and opposing efforts to defund, disband, dismantle, abolish. We've heard all of the hyperbolic rhetoric, but also leading to actual policies like in New York City, where they took away $1 billion from the NYPD. As a consequence, we've seen NYPD suicides go up. We've seen retirement packets go up, shootings go up. You can look at stats where over the course of a week, you're actually more at risk of being shot in New York City than dying of COVID. So maybe when passing out masks, you should be passing out vests as well. So I think that there's clear contrast between President Trump and Joe Biden, between the Republicans and the Democrats, when it comes towards our borders, our homeland security, our national security, supporting our military, supporting our veterans, strengthening our rule of law, wanting safety and security. wanting peace and prosperity. The contrast is clear not only from President Trump's accomplishments and his policies, but also the Democrats' rhetoric and their failure, including their policies. And we have to look no further than the cities that they run, the sanctuary cities they run, the sanctuary states that they run. And one last point, I mentioned President Obama's speech a little bit earlier. Michelle Obama's speech, she was going after Donald Trump for building cages. Are you kidding me? It was the Obama-Biden administration that built what you are referring to as cages. So this dishonesty in the, not just when we're talking about tax policy and we're talking about China and everything else we've discussed so far here, but also we're seeing on the illegal immigration front.
Yeah, no, I think you pick up with sanctuary cities as an example, and you look the linkage to the drug trade, overdoses, the linkage to human trafficking, whether for labor or for sex trafficking. We focus on those a lot of times as activities, and the reality is cartels dominate that. They smuggle people and goods across our border. And the president has been right all along. Border security is national security. It's a key component of national security. And we should be looking at the cartels. We should look at the cartel activity, and we have to secure the border. Inside the United States, Tim, when you led off talking about the threat to the average American, there's not a border between Ohio and California. Once you cross into California illegally, you can go anywhere in the United States of America. And the sanctuary policies make it easy for people to operate illegally, not just as citizens, but to have all their activities. You look at some of the sanctuary cities like Chicago, and you say, this would not only will we be a welcoming place, we'll keep you safe. We won't even target your illegal operations. So you see, why are these criminal enterprises based there? And it shows up in the murder rate. And it's incredibly linked to defund ICE, to defund police. All makes America less free and less safe. And so, I think the president's had a very clear message that part of defending America means we defend our borders and we defend our identity. Citizenship has to matter. You think how crazy that is that you can't even ask whether someone's a citizen or not as part of drawing our congressional maps in the census. How controversial that's been. And lastly, the president, when he looked at immigration, you saw that he clearly was open to doing a deal, like finding a way to make, not just with a cell phone and pen, but a negotiated legal way for DACA to actually happen. And when Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer realized that the president was serious about deal making, they became the no deal Democrats. There's no deal they're going to cut. And the president is a deal maker. He's ready to find a way to move forward legally, and all of his efforts incredibly try to push people back to the negotiating table, but the no deal Democrats are having none of it.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer would just rather keep certain things alive as campaign issues than actually solve the problem. So as we put the finishing touches on the Democratic National Convention, quite mercifully, I would say, and look forward to this coming week, where on Monday it's the Republican National Convention, where President Trump will be taking part and have a role in every night of the convention. There's quite a contrast between what the Democrats tried to portray as what an awful dark place the United States of America is, and actually completely ignoring the fact that every time that Joe Biden points out something that he says about America needs to get fixed, the obvious question that is never asked, not by him or by the news media, is, well, if you've identified this problem, old buddy, what have you been doing for 47 years as an elected official in Washington, including 8 as vice president, of course? So the contrast is going to be between the DNC and their dark view of America and President Trump and his optimistic view of America, that America is, in fact, the greatest country that the face of the earth has ever seen. And its brightest days are ahead, and the best is yet to come. So as you look forward to the starting Monday, the 4 days of the Republican National Convention and what we envision for this country, what are you hoping to see as far as the contrast between what the Democrats did and what the Republicans will lay out in this coming week? Congressman Zeldin, we'll start with you.
The president has a lot of accomplishments to talk about, and instead of using our time here to go through the entire list, because that could take up the entire interview just reading through the list, I'm going to give you just one example. I'm going to talk about the Middle East. I'll talk about the president moving the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, recognizing Israeli Sea over the Golan Heights, signing the Taylor Force Act into law so that U.S. tax dollars don't go to a Palestinian Authority that seeks to essentially, incentivize, financially reward terrorism and incite violence. The U.S. Israel UAE announcement that just came out, this historic deal of full normalizations of relations between Israel and UAE, whether it's diplomacy, tourism, technology, energy, withdrawing from the fatally flawed Iran nuclear deal, eliminating the ISIS caliphate. Qasem Soleimani's dead. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. By the way, that list goes on, and I'm only talking about the Middle East. Yeah. So, as the president is, and the Republican National Convention next week, as it's underway, let's talk about all the important domestic victories that we have all witnessed, all of the amazing international leadership that we've witnessed. I just touched on, some of those highlights, and talk about the future of America, one where our economy right now is trending to soon be stronger than it's ever been before. Our national security trending to be greater than it's ever been before. On so many different fronts, there's so much progress. Well, the Democrats, they're obviously going to avoid any of that when they were going through their convention this past week. The Republican National Convention shouldn't really waste the week in getting to talk about everything President Trump has accomplished, everything that's trending right now, and the hope for the future. As long as we avoid that reality of what happens if you put a guy in office who's been there for half a century in politics and hasn't accomplished anything that he is saying that he would need to accomplish come January. Last point is, this isn't like he is, like that Joe Biden is running to have a Congress of Democratic leadership of young, youthful vision. Between Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn, for example, the top three members of House Democratic leadership, they've been in the House of Representatives for over 100 years. Donald Trump has been in the White House for just over 3.5 years, and he has accomplished more in those 3.5 years than if you had a full roster of everything Joe Biden would have accomplished, and Nancy Pelosi, and Hoyer, and Clyburn, and Schumer. It's actually quite amazing, and I'm sure the Republican National Convention will be highlighting a lot of it.
It will. It will. I think the convention, our convention, will actually show real people who have benefited from the president's policies. And also, as we've teased out already, we'll be featuring some people who have escaped from brutal socialist regimes, places like Cuba and Venezuela, and talk about what they view as the promise of America and why America is, in fact, the best place on earth and the freedoms and liberties that our system of government offers to individuals. And so, Congressman Davidson, go to you for a final thought here. As our convention moves into being starting on Monday coming up, the president, it's obvious to everyone, it was the envy of the world. The president built the world's best economy once. The unemployment was at historic lows all the way across the board for women, for blacks, for Latinos, for Asians, for veterans, for disabled Americans, just about anybody you could name. And then it was artificially interrupted by the outside global pandemic. And no one should ever forget that this was, in fact, a disease that affected the entire world, every country on earth. And the economy under the president's policies is already coming back. We've seen the last 3 consecutive months were record months for job growth. 9.3 million jobs created in that 3-month period. It is the single greatest period of job growth in American history. And contrast that with Joe Biden's record of dismal economic failure. And I think that's a good springboard. What a difference it will be to hear people talking optimistically about the United States of America. And wouldn't we rather encourage people to be for something, to be in favor of something, rather than appeal to people's pessimistic tendencies that they might have if you're even considering voting for Joe Biden and the Democrats? Isn't that just a better way to look at the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of it really is going to come down to past, present, and future. And you highlighted it. Past Donald Trump's record is a clear, stark contrast of deeds over Biden's no results, bad ideas, some pretty words, but horrible, horrible results. So running on the past, Donald Trump's clearly got a better record. Running on the present situation, look at Donald Trump as a decisive leader who's taken action, including when he couldn't get Congress to function properly because the no deal Democrats won't come to the table, won't stay at the table, and won't move off of a position to really do what's best for the average American. But the part they especially don't want to talk about is the future. Donald Trump has got a proven track record of delivering results for our economy, peace, and prosperity. The results have been tremendous. Who do you really want to trust to bring America back to greatness in our economy, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, who isn't even advocating traditional Democrat ideas? He's pushing socialist ideas that have failed everywhere they've been tried, and they certainly won't be, made better by Joe Biden's poor leadership. Donald Trump is a decisive leader, and he's got an optimistic, positive view of America, and that aligns with our actual history. While it's far from perfect, and we have a chance to be better, we recognize that America really is the world's land of opportunity, and we're not going to stay that way by implementing ideas that are hostile or antithetical to the very principles that have made and kept America free for so long.
Absolutely right. Gentlemen, I am afraid we're going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but I want to thank you both very much. Congressman Lee Zeldin, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Tim.
And Congressman Warren Davidson of Ohio, thank you for being with us.
Thanks very much, Tim.
And to our viewers, join us again next week for another edition of War Room Weekly here on Team Trump Online. Before you go, please give this video a thumbs up, either subscribe to our channel or like our page. And don't forget to download the Trump 2020 app on your smartphone. It really is the best way to stay connected to the campaign. You can volunteer, you can make voter phone calls, and earn points to win great prizes, and you can turn in those points in exchange for great prizes up to and including a picture of yourself with President Trump. That app is available in the App Store now. Just search for Trump 2020. Thank you again. Until next week, I'm Tim Murtaugh.
Trump campaign is now reaching voters online.
You are seeing the President of the United States. Look at the lines.
You joined our movement.
A lot of President Trump supporters here.
Greatest movement in the history of our country. I'm fighting for you, and I love doing it with everything that I have. And I will never, ever stop. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
President Trump is the leader who will rebuild the promise of America and ensure that every citizen can realize their American dream. What does it say really about Biden's lack of leadership? I mean, it's appalling. I believe in the rule and law. I lived my life by it and I fought for it. Ladies and gentlemen, leaders and fighters of freedom and liberty and the American